Before we begin our story, we must first go back in time. We must go back almost 25 years. It was a much simpler time. A time a lot less hectic and chaotic. We go back to the fall of 1994, September to be more specific. At that time, Bill Clinton was the President of the United States. The number one movie in America was Forrest Gump, starring Tom Hanks. Boyz II Men had the number one song with I'll Make Love to You. We were all fixated by a dramatic chase in Los Angeles. And a crippling strike would halt America's pastime. On average, you would pay $1.09 per gallon for gasoline. Your average loaf of bread would go for $1.59. And if you wanted to go to the theater to see a movie, you were expected to pay on average $4.08 per ticket. But in the town of Hadley, Michigan, a new endeavor was about to begin that would be centered on the historic Hadley Town Hall. And this is the origins of the Michigan Wrestling Organization. And since then, the MWO has provided live entertainment from venues big and small across the great state of Michigan. Each stop, each event would be a stopping point to the road that we would embark on in June of 2019. An event no one saw coming.
So, I don't know, probably 9 or 10 years ago, we went to Gary and Bonnie Bruni's house. That's Pastor John Bruni's parents, who live in Davison. And it was kind of a yearly tradition. We would go up and we were welcomed in as part of the family to go hang out and just on a particular weekend of the year. And this weekend we decided to go kind of on a joyride. So the three brothers and I hopped in a car and we're just kind of driving around town there a little bit and stumbled upon the city market and noticed there was a lot of wares for sale. So we're kind of checking those things out. We noticed there was some commotion in the back room and we decided, hey, what is that? So we went to the back to check it out and noticed there was a sign that said MWO, and we noticed there was professional wrestling going on in what I believe was an old stockroom of a Kmart, and we just thought, well, that's really cool and we would love to come back up at some point and check it out.
So I think the first thing that I remember in terms of correspondence about this event was a direct message came in to the MWO's Facebook page, and I'm pretty sure it was from Drew, and just inquiring whether or not it would even be possible to organize some sort of an event in Fremont, Indiana.
The idea for bringing the MWO to Fremont was quite an interesting one. So Pastor Bruni had put together years and years ago a service that was dealing with the theme of wrestling with your faith. And so we had actually talked about it for a long, long time about bringing that sermon series back since it had been so long. In fact, it predated us going to Zion Missionary Church, and we'd always talked about it. And I said, let's do something like that. Let's have a theme and have kind of a few weeks to go along with there, back on based on what you did in the past. And so John put together the process of the services. I believe it was 4 or 6 Sundays in a row of wrestling with your faith. And in the meantime, we were talking about who could we contact about bringing professional wrestling right here to Fremont. And we thought about it, and both of us thought, the MWO up in Flint, Michigan from years ago. Wonder if they're still in operation. We'd love to check them out. So I contacted Jason Klaus, and he said, absolutely, we'll do whatever you need. We will absolutely come down. And I was just kind of blown away because it's quite a commitment to drive and haul all that stuff from Flint, Michigan down to Fremont. But we were thrilled. And
my first reaction was, you know, why us? You know what I mean? There was, you know, plenty of other wrestling promotions that were closer in proximity to their area that, you know, and I told them, you know, I replied, you know, as honored as I am, you know, I can surely get you in contact with a promoter that's closer in your area, because a lot of the MWO superstars work for other promotions, and a few of them work in the Indiana area. So I knew that it would, you know, be minimal effort to get them in contact with a closer promotion.
We thought this is exactly what we're looking for. This is going to be something that is going to tie the whole community together, bring a bunch of folks together, and we even talked about it even at that time before the very first event that, boy, this could be an annual tradition.
The answer was absolutely not. We want the MWO.
When Jason and I were chatting that very first time on the phone, in fact, I remember when he answered, I said, "Is this Hal?" And
so I remember the first phone call that I had with Drew, and you know, this was, you know, weeks had gone by, you know, and maybe even a month or so had gone by before I heard back from him, and it was another direct message, you know, through the Facebook page, and they said, "Hey, we want MWO, and you know, it's going to be on this date. It's part of this outdoor festival type of thing. We were going to set the ring up in the parking lot of the Zion Church that Drew is affiliated with, that was kind of putting on this whole thing. And we were merely just going to be like the entertainment of this outdoor, you know, type of festival. Nothing that we haven't done before in other areas, but you know, this was different, you know, obviously, because there was this church in Indiana that wanted the MWO. They didn't want a closer promotion, they wanted us. And man, I tell you, I really it's one of those things. I took it very, very seriously, because I realized this opportunity that was presented to us.
And so we talked about getting some things set up, and the plans kind of had to change a little bit as time went on, but it actually worked out for the best by the time everything was said and done.
And you know, over the course of a couple of phone calls, it was a done deal. And I was actually, you know, I have this weird thing where, you know, if I'm on the phone with somebody, if I'm conducting business, or you know, if I'm just on the phone, I don't like having a lot of people around me, because you know, I have to concentrate on what I'm saying, and because of, you know, the whole speech impediment thing. But you know, I can't have a lot of people around me. I can't have that noise, because it starts to cancel out everything that I'm trying to listen to. So
I knew right away, you know, after we chatted for just a few minutes, that we had a lot in common. We saw a lot eye to eye on very many things, and one of the things that we have a lot in common is the fact that we're just going to say yes. We don't know how we're going to get there. We don't know what the process is going to look like yet, but the answer is yes. And then we'll figure it out as we get there. And that's what I really like, that kind of go-get-em attitude, the idea that you're just going to push through and plug through. And he talked about, you know, I asked, I said, do you think anybody's going to be concerned about the long drive and all this stuff? And he was like, absolutely not. We're going to just be blown away by this. This is great. This is awesome. And
when the time came that we were going to actually, I was going to get on the phone with Drew and, you know, have an actual conversation with him, you know, I went down into my garage, and my wife had come down with me, and I was sitting there, and I was just writing down notes and listening to all these details, and kind of what he had in mind, and bouncing back with what we're able to do. And it was probably one of, if not the most enjoyable conversations I've ever had with a representative of a hosting venue. And I didn't have to hang up and then tell my wife what the conversation was, as she was sitting next to me, and Drew was so excited when we were talking, and I was too, but he was so amped up about this, my wife could actually hear his side of the conversation without fail. And because he has that booming voice, and you can tell when he is excited about something, because he's a very boisterous individual, and that's one of the things I love most about this guy. And
our expectations for the show was that we were going to have dozens and dozens of people come. We weren't sure how many would come. We were hoping for a large crowd, and we were really impressed by the number of folks that showed up. And even then, we had ideas that this can, next year, in the future, that this thing can really be much, much larger. And so when we had to change venues and move everything over to the middle school gym, kind of on a whim, like I said, it actually turned out to be the best situation, because we had bleachers, we had chairs, we put the ring right up in the middle of the gymnasium there. It was plenty of space. The wrestlers had plenty of space in the back for preparing and things like that. It just worked out wonderfully. And the fact was that we knew that this event was going to really be something special.
I hung up, and I looked over at Carrie, and I just said, that was the most awesome phone call I've had in quite some time in terms of dealing with a venue, And my wife, who's even harder to impress on a business level, especially in this business. When I looked at her and we were talking, she said one sentence that just, hammered everything home, and she said, "This sounds like an awesome opportunity." And it was based solely on, what Drew had to say, his level of excitement, my level of excitement. She knew I was getting, pretty amped the more that I thought about this.
Y'all, Michigan Wrestling Organization history will be made on Saturday, June the 15th, because for the first time ever, the Michigan Wrestling Organization is heading out of state. Slam-a-Thon will be held in Fremont, Indiana.
I know, excited. I was definitely a little anxious to see what kind of turnout we would get. Never been there. I've never been there. New venue, new state. You never really know. So it was definitely. I didn't want to spend literally over a day, in transit at a show, going back home, and have 4 people show up. So I was definitely anxious about that.
When I first heard about the fact that the Michigan Wrestling Organization was going to do a show outside of Michigan, I was definitely intrigued. I was very excited as well, because it's obviously something we'd never done before. The furthest we've ever traveled for a show, I believe, was Columbiaville, was it not?
First reaction was nervous. For one, I was going into a whole different state, leading the company as a champion, and wasn't sure how we were going to be received over there.
I was excited. excited. Really, most of us were. You could tell as soon as the basher Jason Klaus told us that we were going out of state. We knew it was going to be a big deal.
Well, for me, from my perspective, I was super fun. I was super nervous, and not only nervous but excited at the same time because it's a new crowd, it's a new area, new scenery. We haven't been around this type of crowd, and not only that, we're out of state. We're not in Michigan. We're in Indiana, which actually worked out wonderful.
For being the first time that the Michigan Wrestling Organization was going outside of Michigan, it was knowing that I was going to be a part of history, even though I'm just part of the production crew. But I was most worried that the fans were not going to know who any of the wrestlers were.
So my first reaction to having a show outside of the state of Michigan, it was interesting because everyone had a different sense of how they felt about the idea of doing a show out of state. Because we all knew that we weren't going to have our normal crowd that we see on a month-to-month basis. So there was that instant concern about what kind of turnout we were going to have and how they were going to react to each of our unique characters.
When I first heard that the MWO was going to go out of state, I was kind of surprised to hear it because I was still kind of new to the company at the time. And I'd never heard of the company ever traveling out of state. I mean, Michigan is in the name.
I was pretty excited, first of all. I'd been with MWO for a while at that point. TakeOver was flourishing. I think Hughes was champion at the time. Cruz might have been Great Lakes. I can't remember. I'm bad with timelines overall.
Why are we going to a different state? The Michigan Wrestling Organization, we belong in Michigan. And then on the other hand, going to a new venue is always fun. So I was excited to go to a new venue.
But yeah, no, excited. Anxious how I was going to get there because the car I had at the time was not... I didn't really want to drive it to Indiana and back, especially all in one day. So I was able to carpool, which I'll probably talk about a little bit more later. But yeah,
but this is something where we were going to be crossing a state border for the first time. Oh yeah,
and I'm sure a lot of us were nervous because there's nerves when it comes to any show, really, but. We knew that it's the first time in the 25-year history of the organization that we were actually asked to go out of state. So we were all kind of excited and nervous, I guess.
I mean, I've traveled before, and I know a lot of the boys in the locker room have as well. And we all know that the Midwest is, pretty popular for independent wrestling overall. And I knew the crowd would be pretty good, and I think a lot of us were just excited to show off what we could do and kind of network in front of a new fan. So it was going to be good for the company, good for every one of us, and good for Fremont and all the fans there. So it was really win-win all around. We were all pretty excited and anxious for something kind of fresh.
But I was pretty confident in the roster that we have and had at the time that we could make it work, and we would make it work. And so right out of the gate, I was excited for the opportunity. I was excited to give it a try and to really test myself to see what I can do with a brand new crowd.
But overall, I was stoked. Not many people early in their careers in wrestling get to say, they got to do shows in multiple states with the same company.
At first, I was blown away. I didn't think it was going to be possible that we were going to go outside of the state of Michigan for a show like this, but I couldn't help but jump on board because I couldn't wait to see what unfolds. Absolutely.
Finding out that it was Slam-a-Thon was very anxiety-inducing. because, you know, the Slam-a-Thon works as it's a tournament. It's a in one show tournament, and I look at the card and I go, okay, well, Cruz is in it, and Bojack's in it, and Hughes has a match, so that's at least 3 matches for me. And then I was like, oh, but if Cruz or Bojack, or Cruz and Bojack go all the way, then that's a lot of matches I would be involved in. And at the end of the day, I was involved in every match but the tag team title match.
So, after we find out that we're having our first show outside of the state of Michigan, Jason doubles down and lets us know that it's going to be a supercard. It's going to be Slam-a-Thon. So instantly the pressure's already on all of us that are going to be at the show, because we know that we're going to be in front of a crowd for the first time, and we know that it's going to be a supercard, so we're going to have to really step up our game and do what we have to make this first-time crowd fall in love with our product.
Honestly, I wasn't too surprised to hear that we were going to do Slam-a-Thon in Fremont, because I know a lot of times with these super shows, we have certain venues or just certain things to make them feel more special surrounding the event itself. And if anything would make this feel different or more special, this was it, going out of state.
Much of a surprise. I mean, we knew it was going to be a big show, so it would only make sense that it was a supercard. We were just more really excited to get the show done and show Indiana what the Michigan Wrestling Organization could really do.
What's better than showing a new audience a new product and showing them the best that the product can do? A supercard's the best that we do every year, so why not give them a supercard so it's special?
When I found out, when I found out they're doing it in Fremont, like I said, was very excited. At the same time, nervous. Like I'm pretty sure not everybody was feeling like that, but me, that's just how I am.
There's a picture that I sent to Jason of me before the show. You know, hair was all wet and like down to here, and eyeliner was on, and I all takeovery. And then at the end of the show, hair was distinctly not as long because it had started to dry, despite me spraying it with more water. And then the eyeliner was like rubbed away after I had applied it 4 times.
And that includes having to show them our characters from scratch on a grand stage. So the difficulty was already up to a level 10 right before we even got to the venue.
So we have done shows where the roster was extremely limited. There were so many key guys that couldn't make it to the show, and so we had to make some of them ourselves. And we have done very well with these shows. And the Fremont show was definitely no exception. Absolutely.
Knew it could be a little risky running like a tournament format in front of the fans, because maybe they might, if an act isn't working, they might get bored with it. But I look at it as a fun way of storytelling, and I'm a big fan of tournaments. It's always a fun ride, and we have a really good roster. So I was thinking, perfect. This is the best kind of show to show the new fans. So excited about that.
Always had a level of confidence that every single one of our shows that we ever did, regardless of the circumstances, would be successful. And as it turns out, we may have been we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, but to have this show be as successful as it was, really stands the test of time, so to speak.
I was so pale from so much energy used that my freckles had faded, so I'm like extra pale. So yeah.
Slam-a-Thon is a supercard that we put a lot of thought into because of the tournament bracket. So it was even more nervous and more eggs in the basket, I guess, because so much going into a supercard and then so much more going into being our first show out of state.
For that show to happen in Fremont, which was actually one of the coolest things I've probably ever did as a professional wrestler.
Yeah, I think if it was a different supercard, it wouldn't have been as good though, I think if it was a Trick or Slam or a Christmas Clash, it wouldn't have had that same feeling. Because each match that went on in the tournament, the fans got, oh, that's that guy again. Yeah, I like that guy. Or, oh, it's that guy again. I hate that guy. And each match of the tournament that built, the reactions got stronger. And I think that made a huge difference.
So as far as the road trip aspect, there wasn't a whole lot different for me, as the drive for me to Fremont or Flint's about the same. But since a lot of the guys live closer to Flint, it kind of turned into a carpool situation. So I agreed to kind of ride down with a bunch of guys.
So obviously, when it comes to ring crew, Andrew and I are usually the first ones on the scene. Every time there's a show, we would go over to Jason Klaus's house to go pick up the ring.
And it doesn't matter if we're doing a show in Flint, it doesn't matter if we're doing a show in Fremont. More often than not, there's less than a handful of people that I know I can count on that are going to be there at my house first thing in the morning to help load the trucks with the sound equipment and anything special that we need to do with the ring, if we have gimmick match or something like that.
And that period of time where you're loading the totes and you're strapping down the tarp on top of the ring, making sure everything's in its proper place before we go, there's always a period of anticipation, and there's also a period where we're just hanging out talking about sports.
Steel Twins, Blackwell, and his lady Ariana. They are, and ex-convict too, is assuming it's not softball season.
The road trip wasn't too bad. I wasn't too worried about it. It wasn't anything I never had to do before. I've taken much longer road trips, and that day was Jeremiah J. Hughes driving, the Mighty Bojack, me, and Jack Taryn. So when you ride with a crew like that, it's hard for the ride to be long or drag. We just cracked jokes and had a lot of fun the whole time. And
my wife and I went down to Indiana the night before. We overestimated how far away Fremont really was, and it was no further away than other venues that we'd driven to in the past. It was only about 2 hours for us, and so we went down the night before, and the exit off of the freeway I was supposed to take was somehow right next to the exit onto the Ohio Turnpike, which took us about half an hour out of our way and into Ohio before I could get back off of it again. And I immediately got onto our chat boards and said, do not take this exit. It's going to take you a half an hour out of your way and cost you another $8. Don't do it.
And while we're riding down, I had already been kind of thinking about changing my theme song, as I just recently started wrestling singles, as my brother had taken a break for a while. So I kind of used the opportunity to kind of show some ideas I had and kind of narrow down to one song I wanted to go forward with.
I drove down with my wife and kid. She's always been supportive. She knew how much this show meant to me and the company in general. So we went down the day before. We were going to make a whole weekend out of it to get away for the weekend, I guess you could say. And we drove by the venue the day before when we got there just to see what it's like. And I remember my kid saying, "Daddy, is that my school?" And we explained to him, "No, that's where Daddy's wrestling show is going to be." And then he says, "Oh, I like wrestling shows."
Road trip, getting there, that was something. It was me, Clint, Tyler Dean, and Corey Kerr in the car. And I had known Tyler since starting in MWO. And then I'm not up at IWE, so I didn't really know Clint that well. And he had only just started coming to shows, at least since I had been there pretty recently. And I barely knew Kerr. But I didn't want to drive by myself, and it was a group of guys that, I knew well enough, and Tyler I trusted, not to kill us or something on the way.
And things of that nature. So naturally, Andrew and I were one of the first ones on the scene to help set the ring up, to at least get the ring on the trailer, before we made our really long trek to Indiana.
Clint drove both ways it's that kind of van that if you hit anything, you're going to be fine. So I was good at that. There was a couple deer incidences. We didn't hit a deer, but there were some deer instances.
And we did have a stop or two at like some sort of gas station / market for a little bit of breakfast.
Well, on the way down. Well, we always went to some sort of gas station. It was always on the agenda.
Ride to the shows are probably the most. It's fun going there, but riding with the Freebirds, riding back is another story that would probably never be told.
As we were making our way, everybody said, "Oh, you don't have to go through tolls." Well, Nick was the navigator. Everybody knows Nick passes out. So we're driving, and Nick passes out as we're entering Indiana and swipes his hand across the phone. And his phone's on his lap across the car, so I can't really mess with it. And he's not waking up, so then we end up going through tolls, but none of us had any money.
But the energy was in the air the whole time. We were very excited to get there and just see what the place was like and everything and try to do our best, That's what we live for, that gypsy life on the road, and it was just one more show to us. We were ready to kick some ass.
So then we had to rely on Ray, and Ray was low-key heated at the moment about having to pay off. He had to pay like 3 different tolls just to get to the venue.
What was really cool, I remember, is Tyler had just publicly said, at least with friends and family and whatnot, that him and his wife were pregnant with their now son. So we got to kind of do a mini celebration with him, Clinton and Kerr. So that was cool, and obviously I was there. But so that was cool. That was really enjoyable, and I felt like that trip alone, it turned me and Clinton to really good friends. It continued me and Tyler's bond, and then Kerr as well. We became a lot closer during that.
I was pretty confident that we would get down there with no issues. I just didn't want to get in a situation where I felt rushed, and I didn't want to have to speed down there because you're pulling a couple thousand pounds worth of wrestling ring behind you. The last thing you want to have is some sort of an issue, and the next thing you know, half of your equipment is winding up in the ditch or across the opposite lanes of the expressways. That's not a good day for anybody.
Regardless of which show we went to, we always stopped off for a bit of fuel, for both in the consumption and the vehicle variety.
I do know that at one point Tyler put in his AirPods because Clint, Kerr, and I would not stop singing show tunes, and I think that's the kind of road trip you want. Almost deer hits, show tunes, and the announcement of a baby was coming. All boxes were checked.
I remember. I also remember that. It seems like every time we come home from setup, once we leave the venue, we always had to look out for the tarp that would just fly all over the place, and it just flapping around like a cape. Gosh! Just fearing that it wouldn't hit our car or it wouldn't fall off the trailer or anything like that.
Well, but that is a harrowing enough experience. But keep in mind, we're going across state borders, and it took an hour to get there. So we're driving an hour home
in dang near pitch black conditions.
Oh, yeah.
And we're following behind this trailer. We must have stopped at least 3 or 4 times to try to re-secure the tarp to the back of the trailer. I mean, we made it home in one piece, thank goodness.
Yes, we did. I don't think we didn't get there till 1 in the morning.
Yeah, it was definitely a really long day, but it's definitely a day that
It was worth it.
It was absolutely worth it.
Afterwards, a bunch of us went to the bar, and there's some pretty sweet footage of actual gear rapping to Eminem, and some good footage of Tyler singing Backstreet Boys. So maybe we can find that footage.
You know, the Steels and Blackwell, Bill, they are constants, man. And, you know, on the mornings of the show when, you know, everything is in fevered pitch and this, that, and the other, you know, my anxiousness is off the charts. You know, the one thing I don't have to worry about is if I'm going to have help loading up the rest of the equipment and who's going to follow me to the venue, because the Steels and Bill are there without fail.
He can. Kurt can sing. He's brilliant. I was the worst in the car. Tyler was the worst in the car. But it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
And it was the road trip to Fremont that we narrowed it down to the song I have, the Treetop Town from Donkey Kong. And that's the song I still use now, and I have no intention of changing anytime soon. I think it's really goes with the character I'm trying to portray now. And
coming home, it was raining fairly well, it seems to me, and we were having a real issue with the tarp on the trailer that was covering the ring on the trailer. We were having a real issue keeping that thing tied down.
And I'll add a little funny story here. I didn't know that you get charged to, like, get on the expressway or something like that. They charged you something. We had to go through the tolls, and nobody had cash on them, and I was the only one with cash, and it was like $15 to go through this toll. I was so pissed, and then they gave me my money back, and it was all change, $5 in quarters. And I know we were kind of joking about that the whole way up and down, just because I don't get very mad very often, but it's just like little stuff, and I'm like, seriously, $15, man? And then when I heard the change drop, I was just too fun.
it's worked out well, and I gotta thank that road trip with that group of guys. That's kind of helped me narrow it down to what I have now.
So we had to stop, you know, a few times, like 3 times, you know, between the time we left the school to we got on the expressway, which really wasn't on an entirely long trek, you know.
And of course, every time we got done with the show, Alex and I are the ones following Jason back to his house to drop off the ring and drop off some of the totes in there, and that was one of the last things we do before we left.
I remember once we got on the expressway, we were heading home. I was passing a vehicle that it was behind another slower vehicle, and I knew, even with the rain and pulling the trailer and everything, you know, I wasn't going to have to increase to an uncomfortable speed to get around whatever the hell was happening right here. And Austin looked over and he says, "Isn't that Hughes?" And I look over, and Jeremy Hughes, the Archduke, the MWO champion at the time, was look over, and he's just got this wide grin on his face. What the hell is he so happy about going so slow? And you know, they eventually, you know, made their way around whatever was happening, and they passed us. But that's one thing that I take away from the drive home, is passing, you know, Hughes and, you know, his group of guys. Like, Of all things, why is that going to be the one thing that sticks out? But then again, I guess that means it was a otherwise uneventful trip home, which is always a good thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, breaking news. This Saturday's Slam-a-Thon event is being moved to the Fremont Middle School Gymnasium because of inclement weather that is forecasted. With the details in place, now came the time to make the drive to Fremont. Anxiously anticipating the arrival, it would take a small army to work in unison to construct the ring. A common practice for all live MWO events, this particular session of setup went without issue. Perhaps it was a precursor to the kind of event that awaited them as they beckoned the door of MWO history. Working as one, and within an hour's time, the ring and the set was in place to make organization history.
Middle school is when we walked in, and yeah, it was a big gym, but there was just something about that gymnasium. It had a completely different aura and feel to it.
Before I can really go into what we thought of the Fremont Middle School gym, I have to kind of preface this by saying that when we first heard of Slam-a-Thon, it was rumored we were going to have it in the parking lot of a church just in the Fremont area. But unfortunately, the venue that we picked bailed out on us.
We've done gym shows at Bentley. Our home venue at the time was the Richfield Road Church, and that was a gym. We did the McCree Theater, for a while in Flint, and so I know what a gym looks and feels like for the most part. But this one, man, as soon as you walked in, you're just like, wow. There is a significantly different aura about this venue than any other one that we've performed in.
When we got there, we all knew it was going to be something special. Walking into the building just kind of filled me specifically with a sense of like, whoa, like this is by far one of the best venues we were ever at. And
when you first walk in, it was open, and I'm scared, like, how are we going to fill this place?
So whenever you go to a new venue, you're always curious at what kind of space you're going to have and what the atmosphere and the area looks like inside the venue. We've never been there. And Jason always does a great job at picking out some really good venues and to give us what we need to perform to successfully.
So first thing I'm going to say is because I don't think we were there for setup because, Freebirds show up late is what we do. It's not like we try, but it's just somehow it happens.
Walking into the gymnasium at the Fremont Middle School, you realized it's big. It was big. It was bigger than Richfield, which is where most of the shows were done. It was bigger than that place in Waterford. It was bigger than the place in Fenton. Where Rama and Bunkhouse were that one year.
First got to look at the gymnasium, and it was like walking in. Obviously, it was a venue we'd never been in before, and you walk into it, and it's immediately unfamiliar territory. You're seeing on the walls in the gym the teams, like the basketball teams and the awards that they've won. It's a middle school gym, and it's all sorts of Fremont paraphernalia around, and it's cool and all, but it's very off-putting because you're in another territory you're not familiar with.
Oh, absolutely. When we got to the gymnasium, it was everything we could ever imagine. It was like a venue in and of itself. And we've been to gyms like the Bentley High School gym. We've been to the middle school gym. We've had the Richfield Road Church Gymnasium as a home base.
Yeah. But it's always kind of a mental thing for me. I walk in, I just kind of take a look at everything and walk into the gym for the first time like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. This is going to work out perfect. And I'm looking around, knowing certain things that I plan on doing, and I'm like, yep, this is going to work.
You know, when I first broke into the business, I used to ride with Mr. Positive, and he used to crack this joke when we were going to like a venue I never seen. He would say, "Oh, there's the venue," and point out of the car, and it would be like a little shack on the side of the road. So that was always kind of a joke we used to always throw around there, but it's kind of true sometimes. I mean, I'm always humbled to wrestle wherever, anywhere new. It's kind of like a bucket list thing for me, but, you know, we've all legit wrestled in some pretty sketchy venues or some bad looking spots, so you just never really know.
We knew the show was going to be special. I remember we were walking around. I don't remember who I was with, but a couple of guys, we were joking about how we wished our schools were this cool, and just the fans weren't even there yet, and we just knew that there was going to be something special happening that day.
Being there, we were already there because when I got there, the ring was already set up. But being there was, I walked in, I think I spilled something, but that's all I did. Wiped it up, cleaned it up, but I looked around and I sat up in the bleachers at the top, and you could just see the ring, and you could just see pretty sure we could probably get a picture in there to see it because it was so freaking cool. So
it was big. I mean, it was huge. And there's like a big falcon or eagle. I think it was a falcon decal on the wall, and bleachers up to the ceiling, and you just realized how much space was in there. And my first thought, honestly, was, oh god, if 4 people show up, it's going to look extra big.
I mean, Richfield Road Church had always been good to us, but I mean, the Fremont Middle School gym was just something else entirely. I firmly believe that it was the biggest venue we'd ever hosted a show in, and it really just goes to show what Drew did for us.
I was really excited to see this venue. First off, I was like, this is the middle school? It looks like a high school. And then I saw there's bleachers. I got excited for those even more when they popped out. I was like, oh sweet, we're going to use the bleachers. I love bleachers.
But then, as soon as you realize that the people you're surrounded by are the other people that you see every time you're setting up a show, it very quickly starts to feel like it's a show setup. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm at.
Of course, attendance was good. I mean, it was very good. So it did not look as big. It looked like a wrestling show in a gym. I mean, it looked like what you wanted it to look like. It looked nice.
We had our very own locker rooms, not only for like the men, but for the women as well. And you don't get that every day.
When we walked in, all 4 of us that rode together were so impressed. Just the layout of the school alone. I remember just the color of the hardwood floors with the red logo, and just the paint job on the wall, and just how the bleachers came out, and the positioning of the ring all the way to the entrance. It's just like sometimes things work out really well, and you know, even the building had a good sound. I remember walking in and telling Jeremiah J. Hughes, like, nudging him, like, this is. I had the feeling, it was in the air. Go, it's going down tonight, and that was a good sign of things to come. That feeling I had.
It was set up, and when we got to go into the locker rooms were cool. I mean, it was sports locker room. There was showers and lockers and stuff, but it had that feel to it that felt. I feel like big time felt big time. But it felt like the show was more important. It felt like there was more on the line. It felt like it felt like a bigger deal than your typical live show or even a typical supercard.
So, but it was awesome. The locker room was a great addition, everybody seemed like they were nervous, but as soon as things started rolling, it was just happy-go-lucky.
One of these days, we have to have separate locker rooms, one for the men and one for the women. Well, guess what? We had just that with this setup. It was amazing. It was, it was easy for us to change our clothes in those locker rooms. Sometimes we would work on our promos back there without being seen or whatever the case may be. Yep, a lot of privacy, a lot of space. Space is an absolute premium in a pro wrestling locker room. So to have the space that we had was just amazing.
And the other big thing, and it's a sticking point for any of the guys in the locker room, if you ask them, is having an adequate locker room. We've had great ones, we've had okay ones, and walking into the locker room there, and we had a legitimate locker room. We all had adequate space to exist, move around, change, walk through stuff for our matches. It instantly set the mood for me through the roof, and I think you tell that with most of the locker room, because the mood going into that day was so light. Everyone was in a great mood. Everyone was laughing, having a good time, and that's as we're trying to put up a monstrous ring that we've all gotten used to putting up. But we always have our good days and our bad days. But there wasn't anything you could have done on that day at Fremont that could have changed our mood. The ring went up about as flawless as it ever does.
This is already feeling like home, and it was very, very well accommodated location. The locker rooms that we had access to were actual locker rooms, and I've only been with the company for a couple of years at this point, and I think it was the first time that we got into a locker room area that actually had lockers.
The historic card was now set in place that would feature 2 MWO title matches. But the centerpiece of the entire event would be the 8-man single elimination tournament, in which Roberto Cruz would replace Skulls in the first round.
Jason's pretty good at covering the weak spots, but when it comes to Slam-a-Thon card, I don't think there was a weak spot at all.
About a month or so before, the card for Slam-a-Thon at Fremont was starting to shape up. There's certain things that were already kind of on the docket, and I remember Jason pulling me aside and we were talking, and I'm always asking questions about different things on the show, because I'm always curious about kind of what the whole picture looks like too, because as a wrestling fan, you kind of love those type of situations.
Me being the nerd that I am, I usually am a bit of a sucker for tournaments, I guess, seeing who's the best of the best, and working with the limited roster that we were going to have, knowing that we weren't going to have everybody. Tournament made sense, even though, some people were going to have to wrestle 3 or 4 times that day, but no one really complained as far as I know. We just knew what we had to do, and we were ready to do it. We wanted to show Indiana why Fremont was asking for us specifically, so that's what we were going to do.
So, I was in like 7 segments on this show. A title match, a heavyweight title match, multiple Slam-a-Thon matches in what Jeff Klaus dubbed the Pure 6 Brawl at the end of the show, when I think everyone who was on the card was there just beating the crap out of each other.
My thoughts for the show: in a tournament concept, I always wanted to be in a tournament. Like, that's just me. I love professional wrestling. Professional wrestling is what I've always dreamed of doing. So when I always hear like concepts of like old school, like, King of the Ring type tournaments, I think it's badass.
But I remember being just kind of shell-shocked. I had never really been put in those types of situations before on a major show like Slam-a-Thon. So I was instantly nervous, instantly excited, and I love working with Jeremy.
So first and foremost, I must say, we were missing a lot of key players going into Fremont. All the way from production to referees to, some of our best wrestlers that would have totally tore the roof down for these fans. But overall, with what we had a lot of really good talent, and we had a pretty awesome card heading into it.
When Jason starts talking about the main event, it was going to be Jeremiah J. Hughes' first title defense after winning the belt at Rama. And he was talking about how he was looking for a good first defense for him. And then he says, I want to put you in that spot. And I kind of, to this day, I still don't know what he was thinking.
The card was great. I mean, the people who went, not to say anything to the people who weren't there, but us, Cruz, Bojack, Hughes, and I, the Valors, Tony, and DJ, Blackwell, Cody, Jeff, Tyler, Kerr. Everyone who was there. I know I'm missing some people. Sorry.
So we were all very confident in our skills. At least I know I was. I've always seen it this way, that even if I'm curtain jerking or the main event, I'm just going to work my style, and I feel I can use my style in the best way possible, depending on whatever opponent or situation. So I was just excited to show what I could do and kind of represent for the company, myself, all the guys and girls that couldn't be there, and just show a new set of fans what the Michigan Wrestling Organization's all about.
So me and JJ got talking right away. We had a list this long of things we wanted to do, and of course that list kind of shrinks down as you get closer. But as we got closer to the day of, it just really started to come together and develop, and we had a good idea exactly what we wanted to do, and I was starting to, my nervousness was turning into more excitement and anxiousness, because I was ready to get to the day and knock this out, because I had this whole thing in my head. I had a good idea how I wanted it to go, and I wanted to make sure we could execute it flawlessly.
Everyone on the roster is, of course, super talented, but it was the perfect amalgamation of people you would want for a limited roster. Ray's a great example. Cruz, he can work 4 matches or 3 or 4 matches, or many he worked, and he makes them different each time. One can be a little bit more tech heavy, one can be a little bit more comedy heavy, and one can be a little bit more bruising heavy.
The tournament's done. The card going in was normal Slam-a-Thon tournament with tournament, and then the tag titles and the heavyweight title. And I got real excited knowing that I'm going to be in the first title match in a different state, and that I'm going to be one of 4 guys that can say that. 5 if you count the ref, and you should always count the ref.
And just, anytime Bill comes out, he's so big. And anytime Bill walks out and people are like, whoa, look at that guy. And, Cody's the most infectious person there. Tyler's always great. And Clint, not, I did ring announcing for a bit, pre-MWO and a little bit during MWO. And there's a difference between being good at introducing people, which I think I'm pretty good at. Clint is obviously great at, but Clint also has that ability to, wake people up before matches starts, wake people up at the start of the show. You could have, a huge match, tables, blah, 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 and the crowd could be burnt out. Clint gets in the ring with that microphone and that hat, and he just 2-3 words, and you're back in it and you're ready to go, And
the tournament concept helps lend itself very well to helping a fan understand what's at stake. You win a match, you go on to the next round of that match. You'll see them again in the next round. And I recall that during the setup for this show, we had some extra options for what we want to do with an extra match to fill out the card. One of the options was we have a battle royal before the finals to add a third person into the tournament.
So I think when you're looking at a limited roster, you really do have to look at not only your in-ring performers, and I'm an outside-the-ring performer. You have to look at your ring announcers, your commentators, and your referees. And you need people who can help tell those stories.
And for us to go to a whole nother state, and not even our grounds, it's Indiana. Our shows were called MWO, Michigan Wrestling Organization, and we're going to Indiana to do a Slam-a-Thon tournament. And man, that was the coolest thing ever, because I've never been a part of a tournament type, persona, get like that type of like style, and like the way it was just set up was beautifully.
And I think that was probably one of our best shows, especially with a limited roster.
And we were given a vote, and it was definitely a majority in favor of it, and I think it went over very, very well, and I think Fremont agreed.
The challenges of the limited roster obviously played heavily into the decision to make the show, Slam-a-Thon. Have a tournament, guys can work multiple matches and have it make sense.
Being that the show was a tournament concept, you were already going to have wrestlers wrestling multiple times. And that rather lends itself well to a limited roster. You can have 7 matches out of 8 people given a tournament format. And to that end, we still even knocked it out of the park by having yet another Battle Royal before the main. And then at championship matches on top of that. I think we did above and beyond given the number of people that we had available for the show.
But not just from an in-ring performer standpoint, but the behind-the-scenes help, the production help, was also, we were scrambling there, to the point to where I didn't book myself to wrestle on the show, even though the ego part of me really wanted to be involved in the tournament or something like that. But I had, I've been the CEO both in front of the camera and behind the scenes, and I felt like we had enough good talent on hand, and I needed to take my services and kind of fill in other areas that we were hurting in.
There wasn't very many challenges, because there's been times where we've had to have smaller rosters, or we just had smaller rosters and it happens. So the people that were there, we all get to share a memory that the people that missed it don't, and after they see this, they're going to regret not coming.
We had our ring announcer, Clint Williams, who was just one of the absolute best that we've ever had here. I can't say enough about that guy. He is a class act. He is professional. He gets everybody hyped up. He has everybody's attention. He is just a true professional through and through. So we had him.
Heard it was going to be in Indiana. We knew there was going to be a limited roster. Not everyone was going to make it. Other people had bookings on the same day, and when you're working with a limited roster, there's a lot of challenges. Don't have as much help with setup or teardown. You're probably not going to get the match you want, or maybe the match that you need storyline wise. But we just got to work with what we got and give the fans the best show that we can, and that feel like that's what we did anyways.
With a limited roster like that, I feel like it brings out the best, because everybody's trying to necessarily take over the roles that somebody isn't here, and putting way more effort into being a performer, being a star.
I guess a challenge of working with a limited roster. I guess it sucks because you could have been so many other people you probably could have worked with that you never got a chance to work with. But I guess it is what it is. The tournament is going to be limited amount of people anyways, so you might as well just work with the guys that actually showed up and are really willing to be here to bust their ass to put on a good show and tell the story for the fans and hopefully make something out of this, and hopefully you get recognized and noticed.
We were really hurting in the referee department, and the ones that we did have, Terrell, and they really, all the refs really just they earned their stripes that day, for the lack of a better term.
I myself was just simply the cameraman going around because we found out that we didn't have anybody else who was going to be able to go around with a handheld camera. And my handheld camera was really good for the first half of the show, and then its battery died. And okay, let's just see how much I can get this charged in 20 minutes. And it charged up for about 15 minutes worth of record time before I had to go back and plug it back in. And then I was attempting to do the mobile cam from being attached to the wall about 50 feet behind me. So now I'm restricted to one corner of the ring.
Axel James Gear, who on the show is one of our marquee managers of Jack Taryn, who was out after having snapped his leg at WrestleRama, just a handful of weeks before going into Indiana. So that put, James on the shelf. James actually, he stepped up and volunteered to run the mobile cam, which he didn't have to do, but he did because he knew it was important.
I have to imagine from a booking perspective that Jason Klaus really had his hands full with the hand he was dealt.
Oh, yes.
While he had a core group of guys that he could trust and he knew were good performers, it's still, kind of hurt that some of the big players weren't on the card, and some of the big time players weren't able to make an appearance at the show. But that just meant that there was more room for the guys lower down on the card that were hungrier, that wanted an opportunity to say, what, I have probably the biggest opportunity to date in this company. I'm going to make the most of it.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that.
So.
Wolf Thompson had come in a little while before that, and he really started to become a really good announcer. And he was, with every show he was getting better and better. And he invested a lot of his equipment into making the commentators sound as awesome as they possibly could. But I didn't want him to have to do the show by himself. Not that I didn't think that he could do it. I just didn't want to put that kind of pressure on him. And there's certain ways that I wanted to transition from one segment, one match to the other. And so I decided that I wasn't going to book myself to wrestle. Instead, I was going to do commentary with Wolf to kind of help navigate the ship and touch on the stories that we were utilizing and building. And because this was still very much a storyline show, this was a supercard, and that's how we promoted it.
The show itself went well. I think the biggest points for me and the takeover in general was positive reaction. Is the first time I think we've ever come out to cheers. And I don't know if it was the flag, if it was our look, or what, but we walked out ready to insult these people from Fremont, Indiana, and we're from Michigan, we're better than you, blah blah blah. But this is the Michigan Wrestling Organization. What are we even doing here in Indiana? And we walked out, and the music hits. I think Cruz and I came out first. I think we had the first match. I'm not confirming. I don't remember. I think we did.
As the show progresses, I remember, because the takeover was a big part of the show, because we had the Slam-a-Thon tournament, so you saw Roberto Cruz a lot, and Jordan, and Jeremy was out there every time with them as they progressed through the tournament. So the crowd kind of got on their bandwagon.
One of the newest guys on the roster. I'm still in training, getting my foot in the door, so to speak. So I didn't know what Professor Teach would be doing, but I knew he was going to be doing something. And
the event itself, I think, went real well, and everybody came back super happy. And
I wanted it to be flawless. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted to do everything I could to make that happen. Especially for Jeremy, he deserved something great for his first defense, and I wanted to give him that.
Being incorporated in the card was quite an interesting thing. I remember just kind of joking around a little bit about being a part of it in some way, shape, or form, and I can't recall if I was joking around with Jason or if I was joking around with John Bruni behind the scenes or what it was. But eventually it came up, and Jason said, "Yeah, you need to be in the card. That would be fantastic." And I was like, all of a sudden it got real. Like, I'm not so sure I'm ready for this. So we discussed it and talked about it, and I certainly was in no physical shape or in any kind of situation where I was going to be able to go for a long-term match, 10, 15, 20 minutes. But I thought, if I can rile up the crowd a little bit, if I played the heel and did it just right, that I could be thrown off the top over the top rope in the battle royal, and by doing that, it would really make a lot of people smile, and I thought that was great, and worked together with collaborating with the other wrestlers there about making sure that I'd go in there and kind of trash talk and tell them how terrible they were and how I was going to defeat them all, and I was going to pick them all up and throw them over the top rope. And the bell rings, and 2 seconds into the match, I'm over the top rope onto the floor, and I'm crying like a ball baby, heading back to the locker room. So that was a really neat thing. It was a great experience.
The event itself was a lot of fun, like from the opening tournament match to the title matches to the second round and to the main event. The crowd was hyped for everything.
I did have a little bit of a experience going back before that, though. During our Sunday services, John Bruni kept egging me on, and Kayla McClatcher and Adam Richmond kept egging me on to play the heel, actually, during the Sunday services as well, as kind of a setup for the sermon. And so I would go in with my character, Karaoke Kid, and I'd wear my mask, and I would be in there trash talking people and trash talking, whoever. And next thing you know, I'm put through a table, have a chair broken over my back. They tried to put me through another table, and it didn't break. And I think I had a mild concussion for a couple days because I hit right in the small of my skull there, right in the very back there, and I was a little woozy for a couple days, a little bit nauseous, but we worked through it. And I thought, all right, if I can put up with this, I can definitely do okay with being thrown over the top rope here. So that was a lot of fun. It was a great experience, and in fact, since then, I've had a lot of people talk about it and say, "When are you going to get back in the ring?" And I'm thinking, oh boy.
I do remember, the match I had with Crow. It was awesome. That crowd hated him. He's really good at getting the crowd to really hate him. So, keep doing that, because it makes me, even when I watch you sometimes, it makes me hate you.
And now, as far as the show itself goes, we're just getting ready for the show, and the crowd starts piling up. We were expecting maybe 100 people. We probably got 150 people, and it may have been the largest crowd we may have had in a very long while, if not for the company, in the company's history.
Backstage, thing that I remember was I had found a bag of ties in a vacant apartment from working, and I took him to the show, and I wanted to give him the logo because dude wears a tie, and I had a whole garbage bag full of them for him. And then I thought it'd be funny, so why not make fun of him and take ties out to this new crowd. I wanted to see if I can get the crowd to pop for some ties, and by the end of the show, every child had a tie.
For the event itself, I couldn't say enough on how well it went. It's like from the very start, I was standing in Gorilla, and the Mighty Bojack walked out, and the crowd just erupted. And, you know, the Takeover is notoriously pretty hated heels in Michigan, and I look over at Jack Terrence, and I'm like, they love us for some reason. It was just the funniest thing. And
I'm thinking, I got to figure out something. I have to do something to even the odds and keep myself in that face status that we were going for. So just for intermission, I had this genius idea. I talked to Jeff. I talked to Jason. And I said, I have this idea of having Drew come out with me for my entrances. Drew is someone that everyone at that venue knows very well and looks up to. So I said, you know what, if I have Drew in my corner, that'll re-even the odds here, and we can get back to the story that we had originally tried to tell.
And, you know, flag went up, and there was a pop, and we were like, you could probably see it if you look back. I probably look at him like, they're cheering us? What do we do?
we knew we were onto something special when we heard that crowd ignite. Because when you hear the crowd get that loud, and they stayed that loud the whole night, which is something to be proud of for the performers and for the crowd to have that type of energy. We definitely appreciated it. And
this has been, and the crowd itself has been electric. It was something it was something I've always looked forward to every time I step forward, every time I've come to these shows.
I remember we were sitting in the locker room and I was talking to the CEO, Jason the Basher Klaus, and discussing options, and I remember coming up with the idea, well, we're in a school, so what if I just go out for a couple matches and just take notes like I'm doing research or something? He liked that idea, so that's what I did, and throughout the night I would just go to ringside, not even say anything, just grab a chair, start writing in a notebook.
And then I had my match with Tyler Dean for the MWO Championship, and both of us were nervous wrecks going into it. But we excelled our expectation, and I think everybody that it meant to was happy with it. So it added a new confidence to myself and Tyler.
I don't think there was a single bad match on the card. Everybody brought their A game, and the fans were eating it up. And it's funny, I actually didn't expect to even wrestle that day. I wasn't written on the card, but when I got there, I was put in the tournament. And I ended up working 4 matches that night, which was a career highlight for me. I was obviously exhausted by the end of it, but to go from the start, make it to the second round, and get eliminated, and make it back in a second chance battle royal, my only battle royal I ever won, then to make it to the main event for a show like that, a historic show like that against, two greats like Rick Crow and Jeff Klaus, was an honor for me.
Testament to Cruz's ability. He really led that in terms of, I followed his demeanor there, and he did one of those things where he was still Roberto Cruz. He was still, 24 karat gold, baby! And, but he did it in a way that it wasn't as insulting to the fans as it was at a typical show. And they resonated with that as a guy to get behind, and I went for it as well. I got, that's the Cruz Can't Lose chant started.
And, a night I'll never forget. Not a bad match on the entire card. It was golden that night.
Right. The crowd at this show was nuclear. The expectations were so high, thanks to Drew and all of his promotion and our promotion. Getting ready, getting everybody hyped for the show. The crowd was just electric from start to finish, and they ate up everything we served.
It was awesome, but backstage afterwards, we had a really good match, but for some reason I had this itch right here, and backstage I like to call me Boyak, and I Boyacked, and I cleaned it up a fair amount, so don't worry, it was cleaned, sterilized.
And then during that main event, Jeff rolls out, and I remember him being like, I don't know what I want to do next. What do you think I should do? I was like, I don't know, dick kicks are funny. So he's like, yeah, you're right. And then he rolls in, kicks Crow right in the dick. Sorry, Crow, but it's funny.
I remember coming back from the end of one of the matches, and Hal pulled me over to the side for an interview that I did not know was going to happen. And what happened is me and Jason work together outside of MWO, so he gets to listen to my ideas a lot, and is kind of just forced to sit there and listen to them. Sorry, Jason. And
it was, I don't think if you give me a list of the top 5 crowds I've ever performed in front of as a Michigan Wrestling Organization performer, that crowd would be in the top 2. Absolutely. And I think the only thing that could eclipse that is the Birch Run Expo Center. Oh,
That was awesome. Of course, I was exhausted at the end of the show, partially due to that Pier 6 brawl, again, at the end of the show, in which it's barely noticeable on camera. I think you might be able to see it. I do super kick Loco. Yep. This brawl is happening, and I'm looking around, and I see Cody's locked up with Loco, and he's got him down, and I go, Cody, hold him up. And I looked at him, and I'm like, and I just super kick. It was a good kick. I got him. I connected, and then I walked around to the stairs, and Bill was beating down on someone, and I'm like, well, I'm a hero at this show. I'm the good guy. Good job, Bill. High-fived Bill. That was a mistake. Got a punch for that right there.
So he doesn't really get to run away, and we had discussed Professor Teach being a manager for someone, but we weren't sure who, given the roster we had at the time. We decided that the Steel Twins would be a good fit. But
and then I asked if I can come out to the ring with Jeff for the main event. Me and Cody had wrestled Scum of the Earth earlier, and we knew that Jeff was going by himself, and the story was that he would be out there against 8 people, the Takeover and Scum of the Earth. So, story, we went to back him up for backup. Real life, I just wanted to go watch the main event and see my friends kill it.
Yeah, it was humongous. I remember hearing chants of "Crews can't lose" or something like that. Crews can't lose. Yeah, something like that. Oh my gosh. It was just amazing. They ate up everything that we did.
we hadn't decided when or where, let alone told them about it. So back to Fremont, Hal pulls me over for this interview that I had no idea was happening. Kind of put me on the spot and starts asking me some very pointed questions. And I realized that Hal and Jason decided that today was going to be the day I announced me managing the Steel Twins. So I remember saying that, and all I could think is, I wonder what their reactions are backstage listening to this thing that they had no idea about.
The reaction that Fremont gave us by the time the show was over was unlike anything from recent memory. They loved it, they were loud, they were into it. We wanted them to want us back, and there was no doubt in our minds that that crowd wanted us back.
It's insane to think about how much has changed since then. You know, for me, obviously the biggest one is, losing my brother in April of 2020, 2 days after my birthday. And when we were going through the footage and editing and listening to other people's testimonials and stuff like that, you know, there was a lot of mention about Jeff on here. And
I think the thing that really struck me in retrospect is just how much Jeff Klaus put everything on the line. No one knew at the time what the future was going to hold for Jeff, and looking back and seeing the heart and soul that he put into wrestling, and just the love and support that he gave and he had from everyone, really made it something special. You know, I think it would be, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't include his name in the card somehow. You know, the Jeff Klaus annual event, you know, Slam-a-Thon, however you want to put that, I'm not sure, but it was really something special. It was really neat to see.
Having him in the prominent role that he was during this show, is almost surreal. It's to knowing now what would happen, you know, 10 months later, is he deserved that spot on that show of that magnitude more than anybody else.
And I know Jason misses him greatly. I know that whole MWO misses him greatly. And certainly in 2020 we know a lot about loss. We've all lost someone close to us. We know that there's been a lot of trials and tribulations and challenges that we've had to overcome in 2020. And now moving ahead into 2021, you know, we can't bring some of those folks back. We can't bring back what we lost, but what we can do is we can look forward and make 2021 the best it can possibly be. And I think that means that we need to embrace our challenges. We need to realize our weaknesses and try to attack those, and we need to unify and bring together our strengths so that we can make our condition, our situation, our lives, and of course the MWO the best it can possibly be.
And knowing that he had that opportunity to shine on such a historic event the way that he did, makes me feel good in some respects that he was able to have that. He was a rock star during that whole show.
You know, I think, you know, I didn't know Jeff that well. I knew him basically. I met him that one day, but he certainly had a great impact on so many folks. And the Zion Missionary Church, for sure, was absolutely devastated when we found out about what happened to Jeff. And the prayer warriors were out in force for the Klaus family, and it just meant a lot for the Klaus family to do what they did, to bring together that MWO roster, and that everybody teamed up so well to come down and put on a product that we were wowed beyond our expectations. So,
and I was glad he had that opportunity to be on that stage and to be in that spotlight and to share that final match with you know, two other guys that I have a lot of respect, a lot of hope for, a lot of anticipation for in terms of where their careers are going to take them. And it's just crazy to me. It's just crazy to me that all this has happened. But I can tell you that Drew and I have, we've become pretty good friends. I've become friends with he and his wife, and we've maintained contact, fairly regularly. Just kind of check in and see, and we didn't, the wrestling show was the furthest thing from it. So in retrospect, you look back on the 2019 Slam-a-Thon, it's certainly going to stand out as one of the most memorable events that we've ever done. I mean across the board, for all the right reasons.
I was really impressed with the atmosphere before the show. I think one of the things that really struck me is, this is going to be a really cool experience. Was before the show even started, I kind of went up to the top bleachers and I took some photos and some video from a kind of an angle of the ring and everything surrounding it there, merch table in the back and things like that. You got the eagle on the wall. I thought that was really sweet. And then Jason brought everyone out, brought the roster out, and talked to him, just gave him a pep talk and talked to him about the event. And as Jason talked, I was kind of blown away with just how serious he took entertainment. The fact that this was a very special event, not just for us, but also for them, for the roster, for the MWO.
Back on it now, it's one of the best, if not the best show I've ever had the privilege of working on.
That day in Fremont, MWO title, Jeremiah J. Hughes, Tyler Dean. That was the main event match that I envisioned in my head, and we put out a match that I'm still to this day proud of.
So I think from a historical ramification perspective, people will look at this show as roster members will certainly look at this show as one of the 5 major tentpole events in this company's history.
And then you think of everything that's happened, since June of 2019, not just for the MWO, but, for a lot of us personally, we were rocked by a global pandemic. It shut the world down there for a minute.
And looking back a year later, just looking back, that show as a whole, from top to bottom, from the time that the first bell rang to the end of the show when the tournament ended, everyone killed it. That I would go as far as saying that's been the best show that I've been a part of with MWO, and just in looking back to the history, it's got to be in the top 3 in company history too.
I have no doubt in my mind that Fremont would love to have us back one day, and I cannot wait to go again if we do.
I absolutely believe that Slam-a-Thon 2019 was just as important as that year's WrestleMania.
Looking back on the event, it's still humbling to be on that show. There was just something special in the air that night. Just sometimes the planets aligned perfect, not to sound too corny, but just everything was great. Everyone got there safely. We were treated so great by the staff there. The fans were amazing. Everyone's attitudes and everything the whole time were great. Everyone had good showings in their matches.
It's been over a year. A lot has changed. When shows started being canceled because of the pandemic, all the Michigan shows were canceled, but Fremont hadn't been canceled yet. We held out hope that maybe we'd still get to go and do that one and have one last live event during 2020. But it wasn't to be.
Looking back, it was probably one of the greatest moments that since I've been part of MWO ever. So I would love to run that back at any time.
And so, like I said, you could just tell there's an entire family dynamic and a family structure to the MWO that I think, in looking at some of the other independent wrestling organizations that are out there, I'm not so sure that's so true. Now, it might be. I haven't certainly investigated them all, but I can certainly say for the ones that I have any kind of understanding of or knowledge of, the MWO is definitely the place to be when it comes to those kinds of things.
But it was a lot of fun. And, I think 2020 really slowed down shows. Obviously, I mean, it canceled them straight out. We had to cancel Rama and everything like that. And really, this was a big show. And I think it, is something that you can go back and watch. And especially when there's no new shows, it's a good show to rewatch.
Can't say one bad thing, and just being able to be in the main event for any show, it's never gets less awesome. The little kid in me watching wrestling, always think the main event. I don't need to be in the main event, but when I am, I look at it as like a big responsibility and privilege. And to be in the ring with Rick and Jeff after his passing, it's like that's one of my best memories I'll ever hold with Jeff, just to be able to share that ring with him. I remember just looking at him across the ring with that he had such an intense stare down, and it was just magic. I mean, the show probably wasn't perfect, but it was pretty damn close to it, especially in my mind. And
I feel like that show is special. Everybody kicked ass on the show, before the show, after the show, they kicked down. We had volunteers helping us tear it down, so normally the fans don't help tear down, but we had everybody helping us tear down.
Just because it's so different, it's so interesting, and it won't happen again. Not in the sense that a show in Fremont won't happen again. This specific event and this kind of, the things that happened at it won't happen again.
Just good atmosphere after the show, and riding home we were all on cloud nine, and it's still a show we talk to about this day, and I'm very honored and privileged to be on the card. What else can I say? If it wasn't for the COVID, I know we were going back, and I would like to think, Fremont, with how awesome you guys were, we would love to come back when all this ends.
And just looking back on it 1 year later, I mean, I just can't believe that so much has happened in the year that followed our first venture into Fremont. I mean, we've had, supercards, we had the pandemic, we had the passing of Pure Fury Jeff Klaus. Tragic, absolutely tragic.
We were amazing as far as I could tell. The fans were amazing. The venue was beautiful. It all came together and really turned into something special and magical almost.
Biggest takeaway is that, for the company and for the performers and for the people who wins, it was a once in a lifetime show in that sense.
Obviously with the pandemic, this year's Slam-a-Thon didn't work out, which was really bad because it was humbling, because that was something we were looking forward to doing. And even when COVID first hit in March, Slam-a-Thon was still on the docket. And then, just like every other event that came before it, canceled. Yep.
You'll never recapture the exact energy, and you'll never recapture the exact situations and all that stuff. So that's what I think about when I think about it. And every time I look at that picture, that side-by-side picture of start of show me and end of show me, those feelings come back of, wow, that was a great show. And that'll be something that, like, I'll be excited, in 10 years' time to watch again. Right up there with, for me personally, my brief entrance into the bunkhouse brawl when Tyler tossed me out, and then me and Berto's tag match against Phoenix and Havoc. Those are the three moments that I'll go back and rewatch consistently. And two of those are solely involved. One's a 10-second clip of me getting beat up, the other one's a decent like meth, and the other one's a whole show. And those are the things that in 10 years, when my son, who was born this year, realizes, oh, you wrestle? You were in wrestling? You did that? I go, yeah, we can go and we'll watch those things, and he'll laugh at me, and that's the point. For me to get beat up was the point. But yeah, that's very. Well, I don't remember all of it. Punch in the face, exhaustion. I can get it back by watching it, and then I will multiple times.
And just everything about the event itself was just something so special, and knowing that we're going to be able to come back when the COVID pandemic gets done and over with, is something we'll look back to this documentary and we'll remember. Oh yeah, we got Slam-a-Thon in June. I'm so pumped. I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm going to do anything I can. I'm going to get the time off I need just to get there.
It would have been a lot of fun to go back, but COVID screwed it all up for everybody. But hopefully we get to go back again. It sucks that Jeff doesn't get to see this. He would have been really proud of this, and just want to say I missed you, Jeff.
And yeah, I think it'll go down as one of the best events in the Michigan Wrestling Organization's history. And like I said, I'm just happy, privileged, and honored to be a part of it.
If you look at this event in the annals of MWO history, again, I would say it's one of the top 5 events that we ever did.
Everything was perfect, and that's become the gold standard for our shows going forward. Is let's have another Fremont show, because that's the one that everyone looks back to and says that's the measuring stick.
Sitting here today, I'm really looking forward to going there again someday, hopefully. And I know the show meant a lot to me, but more than that, I know how much it meant to the Michigan Wrestling Organization in general. The first time in 25 years we were actually asked to go out of state, and the show just went really well, and it ended up being amazing. And I know, talking to some of the other guys in the locker room, how they talk about it and what they say about it, and I'm pretty sure that I feel comfortable in saying that it's probably one of the defining moments in the organization's history.
But we will again. Fremont can rest assured the MWO will be back again one day.
The day may have started in unfamiliar territory, but the familiar backdrop of an MWO event provided an opportunity for the superstars of the Michigan Wrestling Organization to appeal to a brand new audience. Their efforts in and out of the ring will make this event one of the most memorable in our 25-plus year history. The superstars became main eventers, and the fans enjoyed each and every bout that was presented that night. Through the chaos of a battle royal and the history being made in unprecedented means, the MWO wrote a new chapter in its storied history book, one that will be revered for quite some time. But in the end, a newly crowned champion retained his title in his first defense. And for the first time ever, an MWO championship changed hands outside of our home state. But one man would emerge as the winner of an 8-man tournament. But by the end of the night, one thing was made perfectly clear. This was no roster. This was family.